There are battles we fight that no one ever sees. Not all scars show up on skin. Some are stitched into the soul, quiet, invisible, and carried with grace. Life doesn't always warn us before it breaks us. Sometimes, all we know is that one day, we stopped being the same person we used to be. Pain changes us, not in loud, dramatic ways, but in subtle shifts. How we hold back our laughter a little more, how we pause before trusting again, how we seek silence because it feels safer than being misunderstood. If you've ever found yourself staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m., wondering why everything feels so heavy, know this. What you're carrying is not weakness. It's the weight of survival. Your story doesn't end at the breaking point. That's where it begins. Because even when you feel like you're barely holding on, something inside you, something unspoken, has already chosen to fight, to grow, to become. And in the aftermath of storms, something remarkable happens. Not all is lost. Some parts of you begin to rebuild in ways you never expected. You start noticing people's silences more than their words. You feel tension in a room before anyone speaks. It's like you've developed a sixth sense, an emotional radar, and that's no accident. It's empathy born from survival, a compassion so deep it sees the invisible. You've walked through fire, and now, somehow, you can see others who are burning quietly too. That's not just a trait. It's a gift. You don't just feel pain, you absorb it. Not only your own, but everyone else's too. Somewhere along the way, you became the protector, the peacekeeper, the one who tries to make sure no one else around you breaks, even if you're already shattered. You've seen too much, felt too deeply, and now you move through life with this unspoken vow. If I can stop someone else from suffering, I will. That's not just kindness. It's armor. It's what psychologists sometimes call the savior complex, but for you, it's not about playing hero. It's about making sure no one else has to cry the way you once did, alone, unheard. You anticipate people's needs. You soften their falls. You give more than you should and love harder than most. But there's a cost, a hidden one. You start forgetting how to receive. You carry others so often that when it's your turn to be held, you flinch. This is where burnout hides. You smile. When you're exhausted, you offer help when your tank is empty. And still, you hesitate to ask for anything in return. Not because you don't want help, but because you've learned that sometimes help doesn't come. Or when it does, it hurts. But here's the truth no one told you. You don't have to break to prove your love. You don't have to save everyone to matter. Compassion doesn't mean abandoning yourself. Healing doesn't mean never needing anyone again. And love, real love, includes you too. You're allowed to put the weight down, even just for a moment. You're allowed to rest, to set boundaries, to say not today and not mine to carry. Because saving the world isn't your job. Saving yourself, that's the revolution. There's a kind of silence that doesn't come from peace, but from protection. You've built walls, not because you're cold or indifferent, but because every time you let someone in, they left fingerprints on your wounds. And now even kindness feels suspicious. Even love feels like a risk you can't afford. You don't mean to keep people at a distance, but you've learned the hard way. Closeness can cut. And trust. Trust is no longer something you give freely. It's something that has to be earned. Breath by breath, action by action. That's not bitterness. That's self-preservation. Psychiatrist Judith Herman once said that after trauma, safety becomes the foundation of healing. And that safety often begins with solitude. You crave quiet not because you hate the world, but because it's the only place you're not performing, not fixing, not bracing for disappointment. In your solitude, you can breathe. You can fall apart without having to explain why. You can let go of the mask and remember who you are when no one else is watching, and that too is healing. Still, there's a voice, gentle, patient, whispering inside you. Not everyone is going to hurt you. Not every hand reaching out is here to take something from you. You don't have to tear your walls down overnight. But maybe, just maybe, you can leave a window open. Let the light in. Let trust in. Slowly, deliberately. Because somewhere out there, someone sees the fortress you've built and isn't afraid of the drawbridge. They'll wait. And when you're ready, you'll know. Not because the fear is gone, but because your courage finally feels stronger than your scars. When your world has shattered once, even the smallest crack feels like a warning. So you begin to crave stability, not out of habit, but out of survival. You find comfort in routines, in order, in structure. Because chaos once robbed you of peace, and now predictability feels like protection. You know where the keys go. You double-check the locks. You plan, and then you plan for the plan to fail, because being blindsided is no longer an option. This isn't overthinking. It's not about being dramatic or obsessive. It's about trying to anchor yourself in a world that once spun too fast to hold on to. There's a quiet fear behind your scheduling, your planning, your meticulous organizing. It says, if I can control everything around me, maybe I won't get hurt again. But life doesn't follow scripts, and sometimes that tight grip on control only squeezes out the joy you're craving. The truth is, not every storm can be predicted. Not every loss can be prevented. Not every unknown is a threat. There's a grounding practice called 5-4-3-2-1, a way to bring your mind back when anxiety wants to pull you under. 5 things you can see. 4, you can touch. 3, you can hear. 2, you can smell. 1, you can taste. Not to control, but to return, to breathe, to remember that right now you are safe. Right now you are enough. You don't have to anticipate every disaster. You don't have to solve tomorrow before living today. You're allowed to loosen your grip and trust that even if things fall apart, you won't. Because this time you have the strength to rebuild and the wisdom to know you already have. Not all strength looks like standing tall. Sometimes it looks like getting out of bed when your heart feels heavy. Like answering a message when every part of you wants to disappear. Like breathing through the weight of a memory that still knows how to hurt. That's resilience. And it rarely gets applause. Because real strength is often invisible. It's stitched into the quiet moments, when no one is watching, no one is clapping, no one is validating. You just keep going. And maybe you don't see it, but others do. The way you hold space for people even when you're running on empty. The way you show up for your job, your family, your healing, even when you're tired of pretending you're okay. But here's the truth. That strength, that power, it came with a price. At some point, you stopped asking for help. Because when you did in the past, help either never came or it came with strings. So now, you do it all. You carry your pain like a professional. You solve your own problems. You refuse to be someone's burden. It feels safer that way. And yet, there's a loneliness to that independence. A voice deep inside whispering, I wish someone would just show up without me having to ask. But vulnerability doesn't mean weakness. And needing someone isn't a flaw. You don't have to break your independence to make room for connection. You just have to stop confusing protection with isolation. Let someone help you. Not because you can't do it alone, but because you shouldn't have to. Healing was never meant to be a solo act. And your strength? It's not just in surviving, it's in finally allowing yourself to be seen. When life has torn through you like a storm, what's left behind isn't always rubble. Sometimes it's clarity. After pain, your eyes change. You start noticing things others miss. The warmth of sunlight on your skin, the hush of rain tapping on your window, the way a stranger's smile feels like a quiet miracle. You don't rush past these things anymore because you know how fragile they are. How rare. How easily life can strip them away. This isn't just appreciation. It's survival. The smallest joys become your anchor. A hot drink between trembling hands. A song that says everything you can't. The gentle presence of someone sitting beside you, not trying to fix you. Just being there. Gratitude grows in the soil of suffering. When you've seen darkness up close, even the tiniest light feels sacred. You begin to understand that healing doesn't always come in grand gestures or massive breakthroughs. Sometimes it comes in whispers, moments, tiny sips of peace that remind you you're still alive. And somehow you're still becoming. You learn that you don't need a perfect life to feel joy. You just need one good breath, one honest moment, one reason to stay a little longer. And that reason? It could be waiting in the stillness you almost skipped, in the silence you once feared, in the beauty that finally feels like it belongs to you again. There's something that happens when you've been mistreated, silenced, overlooked. You don't just walk away with wounds, you walk away with fire. Injustice doesn't feel abstract to you. It's personal. It lives in your memory, in the ache. Of times you weren't believed, defended, or protected. That's why now, when you see someone else being mistreated, you feel it. Deeply. You speak up, even when your voice shakes. You stand up, even when it's uncomfortable, because you know what silence costs. This sense of justice doesn't always show up in courtrooms or protests. Sometimes it looks like defending a friend who can't speak for themselves, calling out unfairness others are too afraid to name, or simply refusing to let someone be treated the way you once were. It's not about revenge. It's about restoration. You want the world to be softer for others than it was for you. You want to build bridges where once there were only barricades. To be the hand that helps someone else rise because you remember what it felt like to fall alone. And that, in itself, is revolutionary. Because turning your pain into purpose, refusing to let it rot into bitterness, is a kind of strength this world desperately needs. You don't just fight for fairness, you become the fairness someone else was praying for. There comes a moment, quiet and unassuming, when you stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "What can I do with what happened?" That shift changes everything, because when life breaks you, you have two choices: to remain in pieces, or to rebuild with deeper meaning. Not just for yourself, but for others still standing where you once stood. This is post-traumatic growth. It's not glamorous, it doesn't happen overnight. But slowly, through reflection, faith, or sheer inner fire, you begin to see that the pain didn't just take from you, it gave you insight. It gave you empathy. It gave you a mission. You start creating things that didn't exist before: a community, a foundation, a piece of art, a conversation that heals. You become a voice for those who haven't found theirs yet. You become the light you once needed in your darkest hour. Take the person who grew up without clean water. They could have stayed angry at the system, bitter about the past. But instead, they started a movement to bring water to villages no one remembered. Their pain didn't end with them. It became a blessing passed on. That's what happens when you allow your wounds to transform into wisdom. You stop being defined by your past, and you start defining the future, for yourself and for others. So if you're reading this and see yourself in these traits, it means you've survived more than most. It means you're still here, still becoming, still carrying the spark of a purpose this world desperately needs. Healing isn't a destination, it's a path. And every step you take, no matter how slow, is a sacred act of reclaiming your life. You are not just a survivor, you are a builder, a healer, a force, and you are worthy of peace, of love, of purpose. Not because you've earned it, but because you exist. That alone is enough.